We have just wrapped up a series that we've been working through here, and this is on our Facebook page, so it's kind of backwards, right? That's the first message in the series, single part 1, single part 2, unique single, if you will, here. And then we did a message Pastor Nelson spoke on single, married, single again. His wife passed away a number of years ago, so he was single. And then he was married and then single again, and that was just a precious week, and we benefited greatly from that. And then marriage part 1, marriage part 2, and then last week we did a message on parenting, and some of you have been asking me about that because you weren't able to be here last week. Facebook blocked that. Remember I referenced a song that we did at the end? I thought Facebook might block that, and they did. So I can see it and access it, but none of you can. So that's completely blocked. It's a long story with Facebook and some other things going on with them, so we're going to be needing to transition away from Facebook. We're working on that. My point is to be able to say, for those of you that missed that, we're working on that, and we'll hopefully have that up YouTube, someplace else. We're working on it so that you can access this message. But we ended that there, so that's coming. We're working on that. But today, what we're doing is we're wanting to look through some of the QR code questions that have been turned in the course of the series. And I want to warn you here as we begin that the questions are good, but they're wide, as in they don't really follow a particular path. They're just wide. They're just all over the place, but really, really good. So I want to work our way through that. And in terms of organizing it, the only real way I found to organize it was, okay, let's start with something that's going to really get me in trouble, and then end with something that's really going to get me in trouble. So we're gonna do that. So for those of you for whom this will be your last Sunday with us, I love you, and hopefully that is not going to worry where this goes. But anyways, here we go. So the first one to get me in trouble, last one will get me in trouble. Here's the first one: frequency should be what? Right? Yeah, this was on the message during sex. So thank you very much. I told you I was going to get in trouble on this, so I know I'm a fool probably if you're even trying to answer these, but we're gonna go for it anyways, right? So there's two Bible answers on this. Number one is the Bible doesn't give us an exact number, so breathe. Okay, it doesn't give us an exact number. You two choose together as a couple. Okay, so that's the first answer. But the Bible does assume frequently. It does assume frequently, only stopping for special prayer meetings and then resuming, kind of like fasting. And we're going to come back to that analogy in a second. So the 1 Corinthians 7 that's referenced here says, do not deprive each other. So this is not a just for men or just for women thing. It's for both. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time. So we're choosing this together, right? It's not unilaterally forced on the other spouse or whatever, right? So that you may devote yourselves to prayer. There's a reason for it. Then come back together again, right? So without spending too much time on this point, right, as it relates to the frequency of sex, you could kind of think of this kind of like fasting, where it's important to eat food because that's an important thing God has built into the functioning of a healthy body. Similarly, God has built sex into marriage where it's an important part of a functioning, healthy marriage. So you can pause on eating food or pause on sex for a while within your marriage, but both pauses are fine, but neither are intended to be long-term, and neither are to be done apart from godly purposes like the prayer case here in this passage. Looking a little bit further, it's interesting looking at some surveys, some research and stuff done both for believers and not believers. And for whatever it's worth, okay, so breathe, okay, we're okay, breathe, okay. Here's what the statistics tell us. The average is 2 times a week. Now that's interesting on a number of levels. The first I need to say this is that average is broke, so let's just be careful there, right? Average is broke. Like, no one wants to be average. That's what we're striving for. So there's that aspect of things. But also, average means that there are extremes that result in this particular statistic, right? So there's people that are having sex like a lot, right? And then there's people that haven't had sex in several weeks or months or years or decades, all right? So you put all those things together, the average comes down to, and then there's people lying on the surveys, right? So there's that, right? But the average of all that mess is 2 times a week. So that's kind of interesting. But I think maybe a more helpful way of looking at this and thinking about it as it relates to marriage is to think about higher drive versus lower drive. It's just the way marriage is. I've never heard of a couple that's exactly the same on this. There's always a higher drive and a lower drive. Generally speaking, it's the men with the higher drive. Generally, it's women with the lower drive. Of course, that can be flipped. I've done counseling with many people, so I've seen this flipped, where the wife is the higher drive and so forth, and that's fine, right? But here's the thing, right, with this. each couple on their own then together as a married couple needs to decide what the frequency should be by looking to serve their spouse. Or said differently, frequency should be based on the other's needs and desires, right? Because we're in this together. This is a marriage. This is part of our covenant. So if we're thinking about serving each other, and one has the higher drive and one has the lower drive, then if each of us is serving each other, then someone is going to be having more than they would choose to, and someone is going to be having less than they choose to. Is that okay? Is that okay, right? For there to be differences in marriage and areas where we in this one flesh union and relationship, is it okay for there to be areas where sometimes we don't get what we would like in order to be able to serve our spouse? While at other times there are areas where our spouse doesn't get something that they would like in order to be able to serve us. Like, is that okay? Like, it should be, because that's the nature of a servant, right? It's not always about me all the time. Interesting to be able to think about. I read and saw something charted out not too long ago, and it's rather strong, I'll admit that, so there's going to be immediate offense at this, but please, just breathe and just try to catch the big picture point, okay? It's a thought-provoking analogy, and so, again, I want to warn you it's strong, but I think it's worth showing, as it will definitely get us thinking a little bit on our servant's heart if we apply it, and if we recognize that our spouse is different from us, right? So it helps us, not only in this subject, but in other areas of marriage as well. So here's the way a calendar might look, right? For how many times a month kind of deal, or per week, however you want to look at that, right? The lower drive person tends to see this as all the time. Like, we're doing this all the time. I mean, just look at the calendar, right? We're doing it all the time. My wedding vows are getting renewed like all the time. Like, we're killing it. We're killing it, right? And truly, they see it that way. In their mind, that's absolutely true. That's what we're doing. I'm on top of this. Like, we're doing it, right? But inside of that thought, do they understand that as the lower drive person than their spouse, that their spouse might have another view, another perspective on this? Because the higher drive tends to see it a little differently. And this is strong, not entirely a good way to look at this. I'm not suggesting this is the main takeaway from today at all, right? It's just an illustration. I found it thought-provoking and helpful in certain ways, right? So don't be offended, don't get mad. Just think, okay? About the point that's being made on the different perspectives between higher and lower drive person. The higher drive person doesn't tend to look at this and see 1 time per week or 4 times a month. They tend to see this as 4 days out of 30 days, my spouse is serving me, while 26 out of the 30 days, I'm serving them. 13% of the time they're serving me, 86% of the time I'm serving them. And I get it, like there's like massive problems with viewing things this way. But pause for a second to be able to understand the perspective. Because the higher drive person tends to view it this way. Maybe not articulating it this way, but they're feeling it. And so what tends to happen over time in the higher drive person is they wrestle with this at first as they're doing way more serving here in this area than their spouse is. But they want to serve, and they want to worship God in their marriage, so they serve. Unbalanced in the percents, but that's fine. But they wrestle with it, of course, in the longer term of marriage, because sometimes in this, the wrestle really isn't about sex at all. It's over resentment, over the lack of equality. Generally speaking, they're fine with that lack of equality, as other areas end up making up for it, as clearly there's areas where their spouse is serving them more in. But when there ends up being some sort of struggle that comes into marriage, this serve discrepancy in this area of covenant renewal starts to scream at them. It starts to bother them. And it's super hard for them to feel any sense of love or closeness or into me see, as the covenant renewal is felt more and more as something that isn't actually being renewed. So some things to be able to think about there. So let's move on before I get in any more trouble. Right? What's the actual date of the universe? That was the question turned in. And they put the exclamation mark there. That is not mine, that is theirs. So let's just dive into that real quickly. Answer A is the Bible doesn't specifically say. Answer B, what the Bible does say, adds up if you do the math on all of it, to a very young Earth, roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And for some of you, I just invoked a whole bunch of other questions. Cool, ask them, but we're not going to answer that today. Their next question, what about the use of astrology in biblical interpretation? Exclamation mark, right? That was another question. So the answer on this, the answer A, B, C, D, E, like all the way through the alphabet, the answer is always the same. No. No, right? Bottom line, this is cultic activity. It is not biblical. It is not biblical at all. Zero, nada, nothing. Don't mess with it. There's nothing biblical about it. Next question. What about loneliness? Do singles struggle with? What else about loneliness do singles struggle with and need help in? This is a great question. Probably my favorite question of all the ones turned in is my overall goal, right? As we're working through the series, we kept talking about family and am I a part of that, right? And this question is basically asking, hey, Pastor, I need more information about this, right? How does this work for singles so that I can do what I can do to be of help and encouragement to them? Like, I love that question. It's a great question. So my answer to that is basically what I said during those messages on this. I would encourage you to be able to buy this book, 7 Myths About Singleness by Sam Elberry. Like, seriously, this is a great book all on its own, but it's actually written by a pastor who is single. So he's not writing philosophically on this, but from actual personal experience in answering this exact question. So buy that book. Like, I cannot recommend this more highly. I recommend it during the series. I'm recommending it again today. That said, right, buy the book. But that said, we're all different, right? We're all different. So while there's some general truths that this book helps bring out and so forth, always be careful to treat each individual person individually, right? Like, get to know the actual person you're wanting to minister to. Listen, and then feel and empathize as you listen. And if you do that, you're soon going to discover their unique struggles and how you can be of encouragement to them. So I'd encourage you to do that. Next question, and it's a small, quick one. We'll be able to answer this in like 5 seconds. What's a biblical response to someone leaving the church? Right? Yeah, simple one, right? And this is tough, right? Because there could be like a billion reasons why someone leaves the church. So we're just going to touch on a couple things. But let me read for you their actual question. This is my title for what they wrote, but let me just read this. They submitted this question after one of the messages on singleness. So they wrote this. This is not really related to singleness, but more to the church family as a whole. What do we do when people we love in our local church family are no longer there because they have moved or decided to go to a different church or any number of other reasons? They've moved or other reasons that they've gone. The people may still be our friends and, of course, still a part of the global church family. There's still a tangible hole, though, when someone who has especially been involved in the church leaves. And that's absolutely true, right? Especially when someone's been really, really involved in the church, it creates a hole of things, right? And so sometimes those ministries that they were in, sometimes they actually have to shut down because there's not enough people now to be able to run that ministry. Or even worse, people that are in that ministry try to like step up and cover things for a while and oftentimes end up getting burned out. So yeah, there's definitely a hole here, tangible hole, but there's also the personal side of all of it. The person continued to write, I'm personally feeling sad and a sense of loss over several who have left in the past couple years, to which I say, you and me both. You and me both. I mean, as a pastor, it doesn't really do me or the church any good for me to stand up here and blubber every time someone leaves the church. But you have to know that as a pastor, it's hard. It's hard to not take personally every single time people leave, as this is our church family. So when family decides they don't want you anymore, no matter how they word it, it's what you feel. When they decide that, it hurts. So I get this. Like, I really get it. They go on, how do we reconcile with this? And what does the Bible say about this? It seems in the early church there was one Christian church in a location, not many like we do now. So how do we reconcile with this when there are many churches to choose from and it seems like a buffet at times? Whew, we could do a series right there, right? But if you've ever been involved in this church or any other church and actually got involved in ministry and so forth, you can relate to all of what they're saying here, right? What do we do when people move? People are still our friends. There's tangible hole, right? I'm personally feeling sad. We get this, right? So let me start here in trying to address some of this. We can't cover all of it. Let me just address a couple things. I'm going to start with me, right? The weirdness of this for me and for all pastors is this. When a person leaves and they start going to another church, they have a new shepherd now. They have a new pastor now. And they have a new flock now, right? A new body, a new local family that they are a part of. So as a pastor, I need to be careful to respect that new reality and to be able to help facilitate that new reality. As their former shepherd, I need to stay out of the way of the new one. I need to work to stay out of the way of the new one. If the person is constantly turning to me for help, I undermine their new pastor. If I'm going out for breakfast with them all the time, I'm undermining their new pastor because they should be spending that time with him so that he can get to know them and begin to invest in them as their shepherd and as their pastor. So it's hard for me to pull back, but I need to respect things in the big picture, to give their new pastor room to be their pastor. It's also a respect thing in the big picture for me not to interrupt their new church family and those people's ability to one another them. Like, I can't be doing that. If I'm still involved in their lives in any significant one anothering way, I end up interfering with that. So it stinks, but I have to pull back. And honestly, it feels wrong. Like, it just feels terrible because we've been together for years. But they've made the decision to leave. And so whatever that reason is, they've ultimately decided to leave, me, you. Once they leave, no matter how well-intentioned, things have, honestly, if we look at it, they've forever changed. As we're not seeing each other Sunday after Sunday. There's not that regular routine of things, right? So even with the best of intentions, things are now different. And that's their choice. So as pastor, whether I agree or disagree with their decision to leave, it's ultimately irrelevant as this is their call. So I have to respect it. And I need to pull back to be able to give their new pastor and church family the opportunities that they need to have in order to begin to build into them. And yes, I'm aware of the pushback, right, on what I'm saying here. And we're all part of the body of Christ and da-da-da-da-da. And that's true. But think about this. I can't be everything to everyone. Like, I have to choose. And every single one another, hear this, every single one another passage in the Bible is referencing a local church, a local group of people working together. Wrestle with that. If the one another passages are new to you, we have a handout on the back foyer table. You can check that out, right? But every single one is referencing a local church, which leads me to a secondary point. Like, you look at the church in Corinth, right? The 1st and 2nd Corinthians was written to a church in Corinth. There was one church in that entire town. And the person writing the question, they referenced that kind of thing, right? There's one church. So back then in New Testament times, there was no place to go except for that one church in Corinth, right? Unless you're going to drive all the way over to Rochester to go to the Church of Rochester, right? Or the Church of Watertown, the Church of Albany, or the Church of Binghamton, right? Like, you had to travel a long way to get to another church. Today, according to Google, there's over 300 churches in Central New York. You can bounce for a long time before you run out of churches. There's a lot of churches here, right? And so people, they end up leaving churches for all kinds of different reasons. Most, don't get mad, just think, just listen. Most of which are sinful, self-centered, not Christ-centered, not gospel-advancing reasons to leave. Think with me about this. I've never heard of a person saying this, and I've never heard of a pastor telling me a story where they've heard this. I've never heard someone say to a pastor, hey, pastor, I'm sorry to have to tell you that our family is going to be leaving the church, but we feel we need to in order to help advance the cause of Christ over in XYZ community, because there's very little gospel presence there, but there is a small church there that is in need of some help in areas that God has specifically gifted me and my wife in. So while there's not much at that church that's of service to me and my family can be of service there. We can help them to advance the cause of Christ in that area that does not have a gospel preaching church. You ever heard anybody say that? Me neither. Me neither. It's always me, I need, we need, our family would be better served elsewhere kinds of statements. But there are other situations, like due to a move, right? That stinks, but people have to work, right? So sometimes jobs take people out of the area. So what has God called us to do with folks like that when they move? What are our responsibilities towards them? Well, there's just a little bit of reality check in answering that question, right? Like, as people come and go in life and whatever, like, the numbers just add up really quick, right? It's impossible to keep up at the same level with everybody. You just can't do that. So if possible, stay in touch. That'd be great. But don't distract yourself from the local of what God has called you to do locally by trying to keep up with all these other people that you're not ministering to the people that are right in front of you, your local, all the one another passages. So if it's possible, keep them on your prayer list, keep praying for them. If you're keeping in touch with them, calendar your texting calls. Like if you're wanting to still minister to them, you need to be contacting them and following up with them, finding out what's going on and so forth. So if possible, do that stuff. That's great. Just be careful not to get distracted from the local one anothering. Local is your priority, as this is your church, and they have a new one there now, okay? So here's another one. What about the people that left due to church swapping or church shopping? Well, here's the basic answer there, as hard as this is. We need to let them go. We need to let them go. We need to let them develop new one anothering within their local church family. As for us, we must be careful not to get distracted from our local one anothering. And this is a hugely important principle to get hold of, or you're going to drive yourself nuts trying to bounce on all this stuff. Whether we agree or disagree with the reason someone has for leaving, this is the reality that we need to be aware of and that we need to guard for them and for ourselves. Because here's the thing, here's the pattern, and you can talk to Pastor Nelson about this, you can talk to any pastor about this, and they're going to tell you the same thing. They're going to tell you the same exact pattern, a few variations here and there, but it's basically the same pattern. They've seen it play out a million times. And if you've been around church very long, you're going to notice this pattern as well. A person leaves the church, starts attending another church, so naturally they're excited over their new church, or they wouldn't have gone there. Duh, right? So being excited about their new church, they invite some of us to their ladies' Bible study. It's almost always a ladies' Bible study. It's first. If it's not a ladies' Bible study, it's a kids' program. Those are 1, 2 all the time. Third thing get invited to is men's groups, right? Breakfast, hikes, basketball, whatever is usually next. So we go, and we enjoy it, and likely do benefit from it. So it's all good, right? I mean, what could be wrong about this, especially if we are actually growing and benefiting in it? Actually, we just said the key, and maybe we missed it. I'm growing, but I've not at all stopped to think about the impact that this is having on my own church. Like, think for a minute. This is the pattern. We see it play out 1,000 times over the years. Every pastor has, where a person now is so over-involved now in all these activities that they don't have time for ladies' Bible study at their own church, kids' programs at their own church, men's groups at their own church. It's pretty wild. And it's not that we don't want those things for our church. We do want those same programs for our church. But now they're almost impossible to get started in our own church because everyone that wants those things is already involved in those ministries with other churches. So there's no time now, right? You can't be everywhere, right? I can't do the same ministry in multiple different churches and at our own church. So the result of all this, but I'm growing involvement in other churches via people inviting us when they leave our church. The result of all this is that in our own church, your church, suffers. That's what happens. Here's the point. You have to let them go. Wish them well. No animosity, no hate, but don't let their decisions impact your ability to be what God has called you to both be and do for your own church family. But am I? Entire series, right? Switching questions. Here's the next one. It's kind of lengthy, so I'm not going to address it all. It could be a series in itself, but I do want to read down through the question, and I think hearing it this morning might be helpful to some of us. So let me just read down through the question with a couple quick comments along the way. Parenting legacy, and this is their phrasing. They said parenting/legacy. I'm using those words, but it's not just parenting or legacy, leaving a legacy. It's more of a lifestyle, eternal perspective. Many of us have small children, and there's much I'd like to learn more about on how to raise children in a godly way and how the church can help or be a part of that. The gravity of raising kids to love God weighs heavily on me, and I feel like Christians, not just culture in general, but Christians do not put enough emphasis on this, and I completely agree. It's a good statement. The only thing I would insert is the 1 + 1 = worship thing that we talked about last week, talking about parenting. So if you missed that, again, we're working on that. We'll get that on YouTube for you hopefully soon. So yes, I agree that this is not being emphasized enough. They go on. Sure, they may see it as important, but so many other things fill in and take the front seat instead. And I agree. And this gets amplified when you think about stage of life, right? Like, people tend to have kids when they're young. So their marriages are young, their careers are just getting started, and so it's like a really, really busy time period. So parenting ends up just becoming babysitting. You know, keep them quiet in front of a screen of some sort and make sure they don't kill anyone, and I'm a good parent, right? That kind of deal. But parenting, as we discussed last week, is much, much more than that. The person goes on, I realize we only control so much, and it's up to our kids to ultimately make these decisions, but are we thinking about the eternal future as much as their earthly future? A good question, right? For some parents, all of junior high and high school is about prepping for getting into college and gaining a career. And so they prep and they push and all that like crazy. But they don't put nearly the same amount of time, thought, energy, or finances behind preparing their kids to know God and walk with Him. So this is good. This is well said. They go on. Then there's more than just parenting here. I'm thinking about it more generationally. Like, how do each of our stages of life play out in our walk with God? What are some practical ways that we can be of help to the parents, the older retired, the singles, the teens, young adults, and so forth? And I love this, right? This is the series we've been in. Family. Am I doing all of this, right? So how do we not only personally live within whatever our stage of life is, but how do we be a part of helping other people and being of encouragement to them in whatever stage of life that they're in? That's good. That's good. So I'm going to show you a video here in a minute, and it speaks to part of this, and it's super wide. It's covering way more than we're looking at here, but I think you'll get it, why I'm sharing it. But as you view it, I just want you to know, like, I don't know the people speaking at all, and that's always dangerous. So if some of you know these people at all, and you're like, I can't believe he's showing one of their videos. I don't know who they are, okay? Give me some grace. I'm just focusing on what it is they're talking about. So let's listen in on this, and then we'll come back. Let
me ask you a question.
Okay.
Would you learn how to play basketball from a football coach?
I guess not.
Would you learn how to play basketball from a football coach?
No.
If you want to learn how to cook, who would you want to teach you?
A chef.
If you want to learn how to drive a car, who you want to teach you?
A driver?
If you want to learn how to fly a plane, who gonna teach you?
A pilot?
How are y'all learning how to be wives and your mother wasn't a wife? You just said if you want to learn to fly a plane, you're going to go to a pilot. You want to learn how to cook, you're going to go to a chef. Women don't know what's intrinsically important to a man, and they don't know how to be a wife because their mothers wasn't wives. In general, women are raising their daughters to be single mothers. Because they are single, they're single mother, and they like, I'm gonna teach you how to be strong, and my mama told me I don't need no man, and they have raised you to be a single woman.
That's terrible.
And go be educated, so you don't need to depend on no man, and get you an education, and go to college. They have groomed you to be a single mother. But if you want to be a wife, you have to learn how to be a wife from a wife, the same way you would learn how to cook from a chef. Then once you surround yourself with other wives, then you will know what's intrinsically important to a man. A lot of y'all women ain't even wives, and you married.
Okay, he got himself in trouble right at the end there, didn't he? Yeah, he launched a little bit, right? But you see some of what he's saying, right? That one line, they have groomed you to be a single mother. Like that, it's hard, right? But you get the point and why I'm playing it, right? This idea of the stages of life and what are ways that we can help each other and so forth, like, that's real. Like, we need to be doing that, right? At each stage of life, when we step into these different stages of things, there's people that are ahead of us, and they've learned some things, and they've learned some things the hard way. So they have a lot to be able to offer. Are we taking advantage of that? Am I willing to offer that? And am I open to receiving that instruction and encouragement and rebuke from others in the church that are ahead of me? Family, am I willing to do that? It's good. But the person writing here on all this, they continue. How do we approach all these stages with God and thinking about eternity? Not just the present. Yeah, exactly, right? This is a huge question that we should be asking ourselves all the time, especially as we're switching stages from one stage of life to another. Like, for instance, you start dating. That's a huge time period to stop and go, okay, how do I honor God and serve God there? When you first go to college, it's a huge time to stop and think about this whole new stage of life and how do I honor and be able to serve God here? When you go to college, usually you're moving out of the area, so there's finding your first church on your own without your parents around. That's a big stage of things. To be able to pause and to begin thinking and walking with God and some specific things there. Your first job, that's a big thing. It's a big thing. Your second church choice all on your own, probably, if you moved for your job and so forth, you're in a new area. These are all shifts where I need to stop and go, okay, I'm walking with God in this. How do I honor and serve God during this stage of life shift? There's right when you first get married. There's when you have your first child or your second child or your third child, right? Fast forward, we're empty nesters now. Huge time to stop and think about how to honor and serve God there. We're grandparents now. Huge time to stop and think, how in this unique stage of life do I honor and serve God? I'm retired now. An incredible brand new opportunity. Another stage of life to be able to stop and think, how do I honor and serve God during this stage of life? And there's many stages of life inside of these. We could break it all down, right? But you get it. At each stage of life, we really do need to be stopping and thinking about what God would have us to do and what changes need to be made now that we're entering a new stage of life. Like almost every time we switch stages of life, there's a bunch of things we need to now say no to. Not like robbing banks. You shouldn't have been doing that anyways, right? No, we're talking about good things that in a former stage of life, those things fit just fine and were probably helpful to you in your walking relationship with God and so forth. But as you switch stages of life, there's some things that doesn't really fit anymore. It doesn't fit this stage of life now. It's not helpful to me and what God has called me to do now in this stage of life. So I need to say no to some things, and I need to begin to say yes to some things. I need to start doing some things that were not fitting in a former stage, but now are smack in the middle of what God has for me in this new stage of life. Single person then getting married is an obvious on all of this. There's a whole bunch of things now that are changing that we're going to say no to, and a whole bunch of things that we're now going to need to say yes to. Our QR code person, they continue, they write this. How can children be more a part of the church? Great question, right? Parents, what are you doing there? Our parents might respond, well, I'm the church. The church, I don't know what the church offers, along those lines. And I laugh in a sad way every time I hear something like that. What does the church offer? Think with me about this. Theologically speaking, you are the church. you are the church. The church is you. The church is all of us, right? And that Deuteronomy 6 passage we looked at last week is pretty clear that this raising your kids thing is a raising your kid thing, right? As in, don't farm out that responsibility on the church or a Christian school or some children's programs at this church or any other church. It's your job to know your kids and to get to know their gifts and abilities. No program director at church knows your kids' gifts and abilities like you do, or they shouldn't anyways. They shouldn't, right? It says actually a lot of bad things about you if that's the case. If you're parenting well, you know your kids. So because you know your kids, right, and you know these different things about them, you're supposed to think. You're supposed to think, where can my kids serve in church? Where do my kids' gifts and abilities intersect with ministries in the church or needs within the church? Like there might be an existing ministry that fits XYZ with my kid. There might not be, but there's other areas that they can be able to serve in. I've told the story before about my sister in like junior high. When she was in junior high, there was a family that moved into the church, and their son, little kid, was deaf. So he's sitting in Sunday school, not benefiting a lick in that, right? So her and another junior high girl went to the pastor and were like, hey, we'd be willing to learn sign language to be able to teach him. Could we start a Sunday school class just for him? Like, we're willing to do that every week, be ready with the lesson and so forth, and learn sign language to be able to do that. Can we do that? Yeah. It sounds like a great thing, right? And they went after it. My sister, if you know her at all today, that's actually her career today. She's an interpreter for the deaf. It actually became her career. God used all of that servant's heart thing to be able to produce that in her. Here's my point. Once you have some of these kind of things, these ideas in mind, great, right? Now come talk to me about your ideas, or if you know the leaders that are in charge of the various ministries, go talk to them, right? See if you guys can work something out. And maybe something won't work in that particular ministry right now because of stuff within that ministry where they just can't facilitate it. But the answer is always a no if you don't ask, right? It's always a no if you don't ask. So think about it all, and then get your kids serving. I love this. This is a great question, right? The person continues. How do we live with our eternal destiny or heaven in mind? Great question, right? They continue. How do we look back at generations, family or others, and see God's work or patterns that need redemption? We see some of this with our bird's eye view of the Bible and the Israelites, but what about our own lives in this time? I see a disconnect in our culture between respectfully considering those before us and the conscious thought to the future. So much is individualistic right now. It's good, right? It's a great question for us. If you came from a family of believers, it's helpful to be able to find out some of that history. No doubt there's going to be some things in need of redemption. That's true, right? But it's super important for us to look at these things, not just for ourselves in the immediate of our current situation, but we need the perspective of history. It's helpful to us, both the good and the bad of it, right? As we talked about in the prayer, right? There's getting hysterical or there's getting historical, right? And thinking through the history on some things, that's helpful to us. The questioner ends with this. There are a lot of layers to this topic. Yeah, right? Yeah, right? They just laid out a whole bunch of stuff. Understatement of the day, but hopefully running through it real quick gets us thinking on some of it a little bit. Next question, and again, it's a long one with multiple parts, so we're going to approach it similarly to the last one, but this time I'm going to read it straight through and then come back and speak to just a couple parts of it. Marriage in the Bible versus our current culture. That's my title for it. Here's what they wrote. I have always had some trouble reconciling the concept of marriage in the Bible with our current culture. For example, we all know from about age 12 to 17 is the typical awakening of hormones, etc. for teenagers. This would also traditionally coincide with the historical ages of marriage, which are much younger than we used to, or is often legal today. Does this mean that marriage is broken in modern times because we wait much longer? The current divorce rate is about 50% but if teenagers started getting married at 15, for example, the divorce rate would become 95%, conservatively. A little bit of speculation here, but we're just going to skip past that for today, okay? Let's keep moving to get to the main point. In the scenario of a historical marriage, where they got married real young, someone would have to use willpower against lust for, say, 1 to 5 years until they got married. But typically in our times, someone needs willpower to abstain for 10 to 15 years usually. According to the math, that seems 2 to 3 times as hard, not accounting for exponential lust building. Not accounting for exponential lust building. And they put trademark next to that. I love that, right? Exponential lust building. There you go, right? They continue. This is something I've always considered, but never taken the time to form any conclusions. If this seems like something that others might find interesting, I would be curious to hear your biblical analysis. All right, very good. So let's go. Biblical analysis. Here you go. Here we go. Biblical analysis. Marriage is what? It's a covenant between God, you, and your spouse. We did an entire message on this. Sex is a regular renewing of that covenant. We did an entire message on that. Biblical analysis for singles. Singles is someone who is not married and they are not having sex. Like, that's it. That's the biblical analysis. That's the biblical analysis. There's nothing about an exact age of when you get married, nor any exceptions given to the various commands that are based around some kind of age, where there's an exception based on your age. It's not there. Let me illustrate with 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3 says this: it is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality. At what age? At what age? At 16? 26? 46? 76? Which age? Yes. Yeah. Right? All of them. Yeah, people get married at all kinds of ages. And yes, people got married in biblical times kind of young in the Bible. But have you actually studied that out? Have you actually studied that out? For instance, think with me about the account of Christmas and the birth of Jesus. There's Mary and Joseph is on the scene for a few years there, and then he just disappears from the pages of Scripture. You ever notice that? He just disappears. Why? Well, the likely reason is because Joseph died. Because Joseph was probably much older than Mary was, as that was the cultural expectation of the time. The man had to be able to provide for his family. That was the expectation culture-wide, not just a Christian thing or a Jewish thing or whatever, right? So Joseph needed to get himself established in his career as a carpenter and then get married. So it's a bit of speculation as to his exact age. We don't know that for sure, but here's the point. That age gap was a normal thing at the time. Men typically got married somewhere between their late teens to late 20s, depending on the exact job and level of economic stability, where women got married much younger, typically in their early teens. And I know some of that strikes all of us as like really, really weird, right? But here's the point, right? Should Mary obey this verse pre-marriage at age 12, 13, 14? Yes. Should Joseph obey this command pre-marriage at age 24, 25, 26, 27, so forth? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The next verse, this says, it is God's will, right, that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the pagans who do not know God. At what age are we talking about here? Yes. yeah, all of that, right? And in this matter, no one should wrong or take advantage of a brother or sister, because that's the reality of sexual sin, isn't it? If we're pressuring someone into sinning sexually, we're literally taking advantage of that brother or sister in Christ. And at what age? Could be any age. This applies all the time. The Lord will punish all those who commit such sins, as we told you and warned you before. For God did not call us to be impure, but to live a holy life. Therefore, anyone who rejects the instruction does not reject a human being, but God, the very God who gives you his Holy Spirit. It's good, right? So yeah, there's a lot we could talk on related to all this, but there's a succinct couple thoughts to get you thinking on it a little bit further. Next question, and this is the last one for us. Here we go. When talking about marriage and the difficulties that come with it, where and how does this verse fit in? Remember, I told you we're going to start with the one that's going to get me in trouble, and we're going to end with one that gets me in trouble. So here we go. Pastor, how does this verse fit in? I'm not trying to set you up for problems at all, Pastor. Here we go. What do you do with this, Pastor, as it relates to marriage? It's better to live on the corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife. Let's close in prayer. Where the angels fear to tread. All right. Well, I'm going to show you a video in a minute that will help on this a little bit. And again, I don't know the person. I don't know their channel. If you know something I don't, don't be offended, whatever, right? But I assume the person, this lady that I'm going to show, is an unbeliever. But what she noticed about husbands and wives as it relates to Proverbs 21 is interesting in my perspective. So we'll get to that in a minute. But if you Google this verse or Chat GPT this verse going, hey, what's this about? Most of the time, the response that you're going to get back is that this verse discusses peace and harmony in relationships in general. In other words, this applies to both men and women, both the husband and the wife, as in men shouldn't be quarrelsome nags either. And that's true, right? Men shouldn't do that. That's true. But let's be honest. And I know some people are going to hate this generalization. Just stay with me for a second and try to hear the point, right? But be honest. If you were to overhear someone talking and they were saying, oh man, this person was such a nag, nag, which gender just popped in your head? Which gender were you assuming? And why were you assuming that gender? Now, I know you didn't like that one, so let's make it worse. I've been in a lot of different counseling situations for years, and while I'm sure a nagging, quarrelsome, always starting fights type husband exists, I've never had it come up in the counseling room, not once. Not to say men don't do this kind of thing. It's not to say when a couple comes in that there's not stuff going wrong in both of their lives and that both of them are being sinful in things and so forth. But the normal coming in of a couple is the wife's coming in and she's the one that's talking. She wants this, this, and this, and her husband is this, that, and the other thing. And here's this whole long list of complaints about her husband's shortcomings and blah, 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 and it goes. And the guy is just sitting there. Like, he wants to like crawl under the chair or something, right? Like he's only there because he wants us all to like stop, right? He just wants peace. In the light of this verse, I find that interesting. And even unbelievers have noticed that this verse is true. Even unbelieving women have noticed that this is true. So again, I don't know this lady, but here's what she has to say. Check this out.
Men need peace. It's honestly that simple. It doesn't matter how beautiful you are, how much money you make, how good you are at your job. It doesn't matter if you are not a peaceful woman, because the constant nagging, belittling, being disrespectful, and just being a downright horrible human being, that man is not going to want to stay.
What's she saying? She's paraphrasing Proverbs 21:9. His husband would rather live on the corner of a roof than in his house with her. That's what the verse is saying. Like, he's not divorcing her. He's not. He's still bringing home the bacon, mowing the lawn, whatever else. He's still involved in things. He's doing all those different things. He's still committed to her. He's committed himself to her before God at their wedding. The covenant was made. The covenant's being kept. But does he want to be around her all the time? No. No, he doesn't. So he gets quiet. You notice that about men oftentimes? They'll get quiet. There's a storm coming if this continues. But they often get quiet. And they'll retreat to a quiet peaceful place. Can this be flipped around and the man be a nag, starting fights all the time? Sure. But that's not what the verse is saying. It's specifically speaking here to wives. That's the word used, wives. It's a gendered word. And quarrelsome, this word quarrelsome is interesting. Do you know what that word actually means? The word means to judge, to quarrel, to brawl as adversaries. And it's very interesting, the etymology of this word. If you look up the history of it, it actually refers to a specific person in a geographical region. Midian is the name of a son of Abraham. Midian then also references then his land and the land of his descendants who were called Midianites. The Midianites were often very hostile and adversarial towards the nation of Israel. And that's the specific word chosen here in this verse, speaking to wives. Here's what the verse is saying. As the Midianites were often hostile towards the nation of Israel, so wives, don't be that way with your husbands. That's what the verse is saying. And again, does this apply to quarrelsome husbands as well? Absolutely. But this verse itself is gendered in its language and is speaking in this instance here directly to wives. So, question answered. Pastor's in trouble. Let's stand and pray for him. Can we do that? Let's stand, and we're going to close the service in order of prayer. Go ahead and stand with me. We're going to put up a 20-minute timer here when we're done, and the meeting will start when that timer hits 0. I encourage you to be able to stay for that. Let me pray for us. God, we are just so grateful as we wrap up here this series. We thank you for the opportunity to be able to worship you in all of this and in whatever stage of life that we're in. As God, we know that no matter what our life circumstances, there's opportunity, there's gifting, there's positioning from you. There's ways that we can worship you with our lives. And God, we thank you that we can do that together as a church family, helping one another in the journey. Wives helping wives, husbands helping husbands, and so forth, Father. That we might be for each other what you called us to be within this local church family. God, we know we can't do everything for everyone. We can't one another with the entire world or one another, all the Christians in New York State. And God, we know that we can't one another, everyone in Central New York either. But you haven't called us to. What you have called us to, clearly, via all those one another passages, you've called us to be family for all of those within our local church here. So help us, Father, to do that well. And where we need help learning how to do so, maybe because we're a single mom or because we've just entered a new stage of life or we've no experience yet, God, whatever the case may be, give us the humility and the grace to admit that we don't know it all and that we need help. And help us, Father, to admit that we need exactly what you've given us. We need each other. We need this local church. We need this family. In Jesus' name and for Jesus' glory in these days, I pray these things. Amen.